Good. All right. So I sent you today, or yesterday, or last night, or something, just some copies, some pages from this book. This book is called. The guy's name is Pinchas Spiro or Spiro. I say it's Spiro, but other people say it's Spiro. Who just wrote these like basically beginning books for for people to lead, to just know the basic Nusach. With some fun variations here and there. He has one for Shabbat. He has one for weekdays. He's got some for the Shlosh Regalim. I think there's also one for the high holidays. There's also another resource if you want to jot this down. And I think you can get this now by paying for it and listening to it online, because that's the world as it is now. There is this fellow, he's actually come here a whole bunch of times, the Temple Emmanuel. His name is Saul Wax, W-A-C-H-S.
Yeah.
I think it's S-A-U-L.
I think that's O-L.
It's O-L.
Anyway, so he about 1.5 million years ago, he did recordings of all of the services, from weekday average week, from weekday morning through weekday Rosh Chodesh, really through everything. But they originally came out on tape. On cassette tapes. Yeah.
I have them.
Yeah, and Hal has copies of them.
Yeah.
I think we might have them in our temple library to borrow also. Actually, he's married. Saul is now married to Bert Klein's sister.
Yeah.
Remember the show? You guys know Bert Klein is remember the show? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a sad story. Saul's first wife actually jumped off a boat trying to rescue somebody drowning in the Jordan River, and she didn't make it. That was a long time ago. So yeah, did you know this story?
Oh, that's
It's all
horrible.
actually, so when I was a kid growing up, she held Israel in Brookline, which was actually when Mashiach used to come every Shabbos there. So Saul was the second high holiday cantor. He was like the guy that led the overflow services. So I've actually been listening to him for more years than I want to count. But he's a real expert in Nusach. So these are different sources to learn how to do things, to learn how to do services. The only service, by the way, the Temple Emmanuel does not have on our website is Kabbalah Shabbat and Mariv and Friday night. The Shabbos Mincha is actually on the Temple website. I think Elias did recordings of pretty much. I did some, and Elias did some years ago. So these are on our website. The only thing that never got recorded was Kabbalah Shabbat and Mariv for Friday night. I'm not sure why, but those never got recorded. Anyway, so if you're looking for resources, those are good resources. So it's Saul Wax, and I believe it's S-A-U-L, but I'll double check because Hal thinks it's S-O-L. So, and I'll send you an email for that. And again, you can probably download these digitally nowadays. Because if we went to cassette tapes to CDs to to online, that kind of thing. So that's all. That's some stuff we need to talk. So I think what we should do today is just kind of review a little bit of what we started last week, which is just get the idea of the basic Nusach. I'm going to make a presumption, because one thing that I don't know how to, and I can't do this in a classroom anyway, is to like do a share a whiteboard kind of thing, which I know some people like share screens and stuff, but in the classrooms I'm not at my computers. I really can't even do that. And even if it was at my computer, I wouldn't know how to do it. You think I would have learned that after all these years? Yeah. So the Siddur we're going to be looking at is the one that we use in the Gann Chapel on Friday nights. The Siddur Lev Shalem for Shabbat and festivals. Do you all have a copy of that to look at? Okay. I'm not getting a response, so I don't know.
I don't have that one. I have a different.
You know this one, okay.
I have it. I'm just looking for it.
Okay, Judith, do you have one?
I have one online.
Give it online, okay, yeah. All right, so Sandy, we might have to just give you different page numbers.
Yeah, no, I'll find it. I'm good.
I have the Shalem. Is that
Yeah,
the
the
one?
game one, yeah, the one we use on Friday night and again and on Saturday morning.
Yeah. I have an old Sim Shalom. I'll find it.
Yeah, I think in the Sim Shalom, I'm not sure the page.
This book gives me tennis elbow holding it through the whole service.
Oh, it's, yeah. The books are
Why
big.
it's so big?
It's heavy. Okay.
Yeah, I have Kabbalah Shabbat now. So
Okay, so we started off last week talking about Shalom Aleichem, the version that everybody thinks is a folk song that was actually composed by Moshe Nathan, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hashem. Right, you all probably know that melody, right? And again, that's actually Shalom Aleichem is really a home ritual more than a synagogue ritual. I just happen to like to get started with the service by doing that, just get kind of set the mood. But the service really starts with on page 10 with Yedid Nefesh, and we mentioned several different melodies last week for Yedid Nefesh. Like Yedid Nefesh Avarachah, or Yedid Nefesh Avarachah. Right, so we cover different melodies for that. Again, because this is it's not really officially part of the text. It doesn't have. You don't have to do this in the Nusach, right? And also the same thing is true with Shalom Aleichem. It's a hymn, it's a song, and a poem, but it's not actually like central to the text. So you can basically use all kinds of melodies, for these songs and poems. But once you get into the next page, Likud and Ranana, right? Then you're kind of there are melodies for this, but you're also getting yourself into the Nusach. So we didn't actually really talk much about the structure of Kabbalah. Well, we talked a little bit about the fact that it started, by the mystics and Sfat, and that it was a service that was created to fit in the temporal space between the latest Sikh and Daven Mincha and the early Sikh and Daven Arav, right? So I'll say that again. There was Mincha, and then you had this period of time where it was too late to daven mincha, but too early to daven ma'ariv. And so, the tradition would be that you pull out a tome of Talmud, Mishnah, Gemara, probably need to study, Masechet Shabbat or something like that. And then you would begin ma'ariv when it was appropriate. So this service was kind of developed as a spiritual connection, lead up between, kind of getting ready for Shabbat. But the structure of it is actually, it's a series of psalms. Right, it's a series of psalms about God's greatness, but also God as sovereign, but also God as creative.
Dan,
Yeah.
are you saying a series of songs, SONGS,
Oh.
or psalms?
P.S.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was the most misunderstood line in Fiddler on the Roof, because they thought they were saying alms for the poor, but they were saying songs for the poor. Supposed to be singing songs.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Bladder.
Bad joke.
Bad joke. Yeah, it could not have been worse. 6. Hold on a second. 5. Hold on. Okay, so the structure of Kabbalah Shabbat is that you have 6 psalms. You have 6 psalms, and then that's broken up by Ana B'Koach, which is actually, that's actually relative. you don't, a lot of people don't do the Ana B'Choach, but it's kind of, it's an idea of protection. Well, we can talk about Ana B'Choach at another time. It's an amazing little setting. But you basically have 6 Psalms, and then you have L'Chadodi, and then the next Psalm is the Psalm for Shabbat. Okay, so in other words, you have the structure of Kabbalah Shabbat is the 6 days. You think about you have the 6 days of creation, and then you separate that with L'Chadodi, or Ana B'Choach and L'Chadodi, right? And then after that, you have Mizmor Shir L'Yom Shabbat, the Psalm for Shabbat. So you have the series of Psalm 6 and then the Psalm for Shabbat. So it's kind of like a little mini week, a little bit of a mini week that you have in Kabbalah Shabbat. Okay. So it's a beautiful little structure. So and again, what you find is that there's really a very simple, basic melodic structure for Kabbalah Shabbat, a very simple, basic Nusach. But what you'll find is that a lot of people will use all kinds of like really interesting, different kinds of tunes for a lot of the Psalms. And sometimes adding in, sometimes finishing in the Nusach and sometimes not, which I always find problematic. I like to give the Nusach at every service. But the basic Nusach is something like this. Right. So if you would just do a basic Nusach, it'd be yes. So once you have that melody, if you can do that, you can do Kabbalah Shabbat. So if we look at page, we're looking at the Siddur Sim Shalom. No, we're looking at the Siddur Lev Shalem. And we're on page 11, where it's a L'chunu Ranana. So you do L'chunu Ranana L'Adonai Nariah L'Tor Yishenu. Right. Again, there's so many different melodies. You have L'chunu Ranana, L'chunu Ranana, L'chunu Ranana, and God knows how many more. But that basic opening Nusach, right? That's the opening melody. So we can actually now turn to each of the Psalms. So if you look at page 13, you have Shir L'Adonai Shir Chadash, Shir L'Adonai Kol Haaretz, Shir L'Adonai Shir Chadash, Shir L'Adonai Kol Haaretz. Right. So, and then the next psalm can begin exactly the same, which is page 15. Adonai Malach Tagel Haaretz Yismechu Im Rabim.
So you don't have to do all the special tunes.
You don't have to. It's lovely to do special tunes. But you don't have to. This is a Nusach. This Nusach is old. Probably not as old as we think, but it's definitely like early Middle Ages, like 1200s, 1300s, as opposed to like something before that. And this is basic Ashkenazic Nusach. We talked about a little bit about Ashkenazic and Sephardic and Yemenite and Taimani and Mizrahi. Those are all different, different traditions with different melodies. So that's a basic. So if you look at page 15, I think we just did that. So Adonai Malach Tagel Haaretz Yismechu Im Rabim. So mine is. Right, and then page 17, Mizmor Shir L'Adonai Shir Chadash Ki Niflaot Asa. Right, so you open each of the Psalms with that melody. Page 19, Adonai Malach Yudzu Amim Yoshev Kiruvim Tanud Haaretz. And then Mizmor LeDavid. Again, you do the same thing. Mizmor LeDavid Havu L'Adonai B'nei Evanim Havu L'Adonai Kavod Va'oz. Do that. Most of the time you have composed melodies for this one specifically, Psalm 29. This one specifically, because if you look at the psalm numbers, by the way, you have 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99. But in the sixth psalm, you're jumping back, so those really kind of make a little collection, a selection. But then the sixth psalm, the one before Lechadodi or Amikoch, is Psalm 29. So we're going back to a different a different genre within the book of Psalms. You know, if you have like about 7 or 8 years, we could study the book of Psalms because it's each one of them, each one of the Psalms is an amazing composition, an amazing poetic composition. So oftentimes, and even the stuff that I sent you, you'll see this you know, one of the composed pieces that that we will often do. Mizmor LeDavid, Havu L'Adonai B'nei Evanim. That's one of them. And that's the one in the book, in the papers that I sent. I didn't copy everything, I don't think. From Kabbalah Shabbat. Then of course you have Lechadodi. So Lechadodi again is a poem. So and it's a poem, and it's the you know, it's the border between Kabbalah, between the first 6 days, the 6th day, and then the 7th day. So you don't really sing Lechadodi within the Nusach. You always do it with some kind of composed melody or tune. And again, you know how the group Safam has like 100 ways to sing a Don Olam. There's probably like 100 ways to sing Lechadodi, right? So you have Lechadodi Likrakala, Lechadodi Likrakala, you know, Lechadodi Likrakala. Yeah, I mean, just throwing out a few here. To think about, but so you have all these wonderful, you know, tunes. What I try to do occasionally is to try to do like 3 different melodies within Lechadodi, which is it's kind of thing that you have to practice. You know, doing the transition from one to another, and making sure you know where you're going to change. So that's the Lechadodi. And then
Dan, can I just ask a question? So on these 6 Psalms, maybe you're coming back to this, but so we know how to sing the opening line, and then people do the rest.
I'm going to come back to the ending.
Come back to the close.
Yeah,
Okay.
The Chatima, right?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So by the way, so the ending is called the Chatima.
Chatima.
That's a Hebrew word for that, Chatima. The word is the infinitive is lichtom, which means to seal, S-E-A-L. A chatam is a seal, right? So like when you find these words, like like even in Megillat Esther, you find the king sealed the envelope with a signet ring.
Right.
Lichtom, right?
We also know it from Yom Kippur.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Good point. And listen, please check your status so you can address the security issue. Okay. Okay. Right. So that's exactly right. So thank you for pointing that to me. So the word so the ending of tefillah, the closing melody is a chatima. The chatima, which I talked about a little bit last week, is actually like 4 little melodies. So if we go back to the first one, let's go back to Lechadodi. I was like, looking around enough. Thank you, page 11 to page 12 is the Fatima. So if but we're going to take this backwards. So if we're going to take it backwards, so the last part, the real seal, the Chatima, the real deal, the real seal, the Chatima, goes right. So it's really the same as the in chip at the opening. You have Shir Adonai, you have it's the same thing at the end. That's the final part of the melody that closes the song. So then you have the pre-closing, which da 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 Asher nishpati v'api, and then imivon el menuchati. Right? Yeah. Okay, now, and by the way, so a lot of people will just learn that much and say, okay, as long as I have the pre-closing, closing, I'm good. You know, that's a guy that comes in with in the 8th inning and pitches 1 inning, and then they have the closing, right? But now you need another for long relief, you know, God forbid, right? Okay, so now let's go back to it says Arba'im Shana Akut B'Dor. So this is like the opening melody, the opening part of the closing melody. Arba'im Shana Akut B'Dor. Da, 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 da. And then you have da, 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 da. So you have that's parts 1 and part 2, the opening melody. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. So you have Arba'im Shana Akut B'Dor Va'omar Amto Ele Bavhem. And you have Vehem Lo Yadu Derachai. So that's kind of like a false closing there. You have Asher, and it really depends on how many lines you're ending with. Asher Nishpati V'api Imivon El Menuchati. Okay. So da 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 da. So that's the same as the opening. Like when you start the prayer, you have so that's how you open it. Arba'im Shana Akut B'Dor. But then you have this like this pre-closing. Then you have what's called a false closing because it sounds like you're at the end. But then you go back to da 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 da. But again, if you can do even the 2 melodies, Asher Nishpati V'api Imivon El Menuchati, you would actually be considered good to go, right? The pre-closing and the closing, and if you can do that, then you're good to go to be able to lead a basic Kabbalah Shabbat, service, right? So I think that I would say the first step is to know the basics, right? So I think that adding all these other tunes is a wonderful thing, right? Because first of all, it enhances the feeling of the coming of Shabbat with more and more song, right? Shir Adonai Shir Chadash, right? We're singing God a song. We're singing songs, right? Let us come and celebrate. Let us be joyful, right? So this is kind of like keeping with the feeling of what Kabbalah Shabbat is, which is the joy of bringing in the Shabbat. Right? So then if we go to Shir Adonai Shir Chadash, page 13, yeah, Shir Adonai Shir Chadash, Shir Adonai Kol Haaretz. Okay, and then the closing would be we really start. I mean, there's all kinds of different places to start. One way to do it is 4 lines from the bottom of 14. We go Lifnei Adonai Kiva Lishpon Haaretz. Then you have that closing Yishpon El Betzedek Beyamin Beyaminato. You can do a longer closing starting at Yismachu, where the little caret is, the little arrow. Yismachu Hashamayim V'Tagel Haaretz Yeramayam Umalo Ya'alo Sadai V'Chol Asher Bo Az Yiranenu Kol Atzei Ya'ar. So you come to that false closing, and then you have Lifnei Adonai Kiva Lishpot Haaretz Yishpot Tevel B'Tzedek Be'amin Be'emunato. Okay, that's why I do it. Now I was mentioning before about it's like you can do the shorter version or you can extend it. It really depends on how comfortable you are with the text and extending it and having the 3 or 4 different parts of that closing melody. And then there's this idea of like what's called counterfaction, which is taking a melody from a whole different place, which doesn't actually belong there, but one that everybody knows how to sing, and then putting that into the text, but also being able to come back to the Nusach. Like, and I've done this a number of times, where you do something like Yismechu Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, Betagel Haaretz, Yeramayam, 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 Umalo, Yeramayam, 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 Umalo. And now I have to get back to Nusach. Ya'alo Sadai V'Chol Asher Bo Az Yiranenu Kol Atzei Ya'ar. See how you have to kind of like find your way back there, right? And then Lifnei Adonai Kiva. So you added a melody that people are using, a different melody. It's not really part of the Nusach, but you can put it into the Nusach, right? So the other thing I want to just go back and talk about a little bit is extending the beginning of the psalm as well. So I gave you like a very simple opening. If you go back to page 11, you have like a 2-part, beginning, closing. But there's an extended version of that. So again, if you wanted to broaden the scope of the davening, but still just do basic Nusach, you can broaden it and still do basic Nusach without adding any of these melodies that are brought in from other places. You can do this is how it goes. Hold on. Naria Litzor Yishenu Nekadma Fana Betoda Bismirot Naria Lo Ki El Gadol Adonai Umal Gadol Al Kol Elohim. So it's like this little added melody that you can add on to it that can expand, that expands the opening of it even longer. And you're still just basically doing Nusach with this like little added, little melody in the middle. Do that. That's a way to add an expanded melody to that. Shir Adonai, Shir Chadash, Shir Adonai, Kol Haaretz. Shir Adonai, I'm sorry, on page 13. Shir Adonai, Shir Chadash, Shir Adonai, Kol Haaretz. Shir Adonai, Baruch Shemo, Basu Miyom Liyom, Yeshuato, or Basu Liyom, Yeshuato. Adding a little flexing thing at the top, to do that. So there's ways of expanding both the beginning and at the end. and still staying within the simple, basic Nusach structure without adding, some other, tunes. Of course, the fun part is finding, all kinds of fun tunes to sing. There's always a little bit of controversy about like what's okay to add and what's okay not to add, or what's not okay to add, I should say. As kids, we all did things like Adon Olam to Yankee Doodle, that kind of stuff, right? So is that an appropriate thing to do, to take that melody and put it to that particular, Adon Olam, Shem Olam, Terem Koyin Tzini Rally? Is that if you take the message of Adon Olam, just take the message of it, of God is like the most mysterious master of the world, right? That without God, creation wouldn't exist. God stands outside of time. Time doesn't exist without God. God can take away time. If time ends and the universe ends, God is still there. It's like very deep stuff, and when you put it in a melody like that, it's like, are we ignoring the message or not? So that's always a controversial question about what melodies are okay to add in and what not. Then, of course, there's always the political stuff too, like, so many melodies that we know are, like for instance, here's one that, like if you look on page 16, bottom of the page, the last 4 lines, right? Last 4 lines of page 16. Ozaru ala tzadik, ol yishrei lev simcha yastun. Ozaru ala tzadik, ol yishrei lev simcha. Ozaru ala tzadik, ol yishrei lev simcha, ol yishrei lev simcha. Ozaru ala tzadik, ol yishrei lev simcha, yishrei lev simcha. Simchu tzadikim la'ala. Okay. Now the question is, should I not ever sing that song? Why? Why would I not ever sing that song?
Why? What's wrong with it?
It was composed by Shlomo Carlebach.
By whom?
Shlomo Carlebach.
Oh.
Right. So do we just never sing Carlebach again? Right. And then like half of what people know as as services disappears. Why don't you sing the traditional melodies? Those aren't traditional melodies, my friend. Those are composed by Shlomo Carlebach, right? Which
Who is he? Dan, who is he? I don't know who he is.
Shlomo Carlebach. He was a rabbi from the 50s, 50s and 60s. Very, very famous guy. Very famous. He put Judaism. He put like Judaism on the map. Shlomo Carlebach. And it turns out that after his death, lots of people came forward and women came forward and said he was a sexually abusive guy.
He sang at Camp Ramah when I was a camper, so it's definitely the 60s.
60s, right? Okay.
Yes, he came to Camp Ramah.
Yeah. Yes, there's so many melodies that we sing that are Carlebach tunes.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, it's like all over like in Israel, and on any given Friday night, you can walk into like 20 different 30 shows in Jerusalem for specifically a Carlebach Kabbalah Shabbat. Like every tune is and they go on for like Kabbalah Shabbat can start at 4 and go to like 7 because he just sing his songs. It's a beautiful. Esa einai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. Should we not sing that song anymore? I don't know. It's an interesting question, right? I'm not going to answer that question, but it's a complex question. How we decide what melody we're going to sing and not. Anyway.
Where was that Sunday night?
Oh, it's not here. It's not in this text, but but it's like it's another one of his his famous songs. Anyway, so yeah, great. And then of course we have all the newer, well, not even newer anymore, but we have the generation of composers like Julie Silver and Craig Taubman, Robbie Solomon, Debbie Friedman, like Debbie Friedman, right?
Mhm.
Most people think that Havdalah on Saturday night sounds like this. No, it doesn't sound like that. There's a whole
Does to me.
there's a whole traditional Nusach that existed for like, I don't know, 800 years until Debbie Friedman, comes along with this beautiful tune, singable tune, that everybody knows, and they think that it's called. Is it called Nusach or is it not? That's another question, right? How do you define what Nusach is? We define Nusach as the melodies that we sing, that we do our partly, it's partly as text, partly as order of text. We talked about this in our first class. There's also partly the melodic structures that we have, for various services, right? As I mentioned this before, I said this earlier today in the first class. We have Ashkenazic, we have Sephardic, we have Mizrahi, we have Taimani, we have what's the name of this one? But we also have now in Israel, there's a Nusach that they refer to as Nusach America Hatzifonit, the Nusach of North America, because a lot of stuff that we do here, it's not in any place else, So like the Debbie Friedman, no one in Israel knows Debbie Friedman, no one, right? Except for Americans that have moved there, and they start singing Israelis like look at them like they have 5 heads, right? Right. So of course she wrote, but again we have all these beautiful melodies, that she's written and have become part of the structure of who and how we define ourselves and how we define our melodies. So is that considered Nusach or not? It's another broader question about what Nusach is. Is it what everybody knows how to do, or is it what everybody should be doing? And the question is like, what does should really mean? That's another question. All right. So then of course we come to Lachadodi. Now the packet that I sent you, the PDF that I sent you has one tune for Lachadodi. Which one is it?
This one,
right, so that's the one that's in this particular anthology. Who said this composer is? Is that?
It says folk melody.
Oh, it says folk melody. Okay. I think it's actually composed by someone.
This one is.
Someone named folk.
Yeah. Someone named folk, yeah. The most prolific composer in history. What was the name of the most prolific composer in history? Anybody know? Anonymous.
Actually, Dan, the one you have here is.
Oh, that's it. I never like singing that one because it's so, unless you have an accompaniment, you always lose pitch. And you start up here, and by the time you finish, you can't sing it, it's too low.
I've heard you do that one.
Yeah, but usually like every three stanzas, I'll readjust the pitch. It's like, yeah. All right. So then we talk about Lachadodi, this beautiful, poem. And then as I said, the next thing that we have. So we have this other really beautiful minhag that's built into the service, which is welcoming the mourners. So if someone has had a loss that week and they're coming into synagogue for the first time, there are different customs surrounding how this is done. The custom that we mostly do at Emmanuel is that someone comes to services on Friday night and they'll sit in the chapel or the sanctuary, wherever they are, and then when it's time for this moment, they'll leave the room during the Chadodi, and then be escorted back in with the blessings of welcome. I'll come in again. And in some sense, that's our minhag, but in some sense it makes no sense. Because look, as I said, Lachadodi is it's the limiting factor, right? Like think about calculus, f of x, right? F of x, right? That's the limiting factor, right? This is the f of x of Kabbalah Shabbat, where the limiting factor is that Lachadodi is the border between the end of the week and the start of Shabbat. It's the actual liturgical border. So if someone is a mourner, then they are mourners until Shabbat starts. Right. So therefore, someone who's a mourner is still a mourner until Lachadodi.
Mhm.
So like this past week we had, there was a family, it was 2 weeks ago.
We
It's
had
some-
some of them this week, didn't we? Last week.
Yeah, some, but it was David Small. David Small, his wife is Rabbi Elise Winnick, who I went to Hebrew school with. He had a prosa with. And the tradition that he had, which actually makes more sense, is that you don't even enter the prayer space with everybody else until after Lachadodi.
Oh,
Because now after Lachadodi is when you're starting with the next thing that comes up is Moshe Yom Shabbat. So you're really starting Shabbat at that moment.
mhm.
Really starting Shabbat at that moment. So up until then, you haven't started Shabbat. You've had this welcoming of Shabbat, but you haven't started Shabbat yet. So the custom of staying outside until then and then being welcomed in, at that point, because from that point on, the person cannot exhibit or does not exhibit outward signs of mourning. So on Shabbat, of course, you don't, if you're wearing a ribbon, you take it off. If you're wearing cut clothing, you don't wear it to synagogue, for Friday night. So that's really, so Lachadodi is like that borderline. It's like the no man's land. But after Lachadodi, it's Shabbat really begins. So that's why you have this particular moment of the prayer where you welcome the Avelim at that point. And then we have this Moshe Yom Shabbat, and with God knows how many melodies. And you could still stay within the regular Nusach that have been going on. Or any one of the many melodies that have been composed for this particular song. And then the next prayer, then you add one more psalm, which is Adonai Malaki Lavesh. What's interesting, I've always found this really interesting that you have this additional psalm, before at the end of the service. It's really, but it's really the idea here is that now that Shabbat is here, we are seeing, if you look at the translation, God is robed in splendor, right? So basically, the visual that we have, the metaphor that we have is Shabbat being escorted, right? Shabbat is Shabbat HaMalkah. Shabbat is the Sabbath queen, right? Shabbat is the Sabbath queen. And so we have this, it's a royal procession, Kabbalah Shabbat, and the beginning of Shabbat is a royal procession where the queen is, like I mentioned this last time, the Kabbalists and Safat would literally leave the synagogue and go out and stand in a line and literally escort the bride in. And that's why the Kabbalists, and that's why people nowadays still, they wear white on Shabbat. It's the white of a wedding, almost like a wedding, but also the queen coming, right? So the queen is coming, and we are finest wives. We come inside, we escort Shabbat in, and now we have Shabbat being robed. So now her royal garments are put on her. Adonai sovereign, robed in splendor, girded in strength. The earth stands firm. It's Shabbat coming in, but it's also this message of God as the creator, right? Because Shabbat is really all about God as creator. God is creator, right? seventh day. Right. So that's how Kabbalah Shabbat ends. And like any good service, it always ends with the mourner's Kaddish. Anybody know why services end with mourner's Kaddish?
Because it's in the book.
Because it's in the book. Al had the right answer. No, that's not the reason. Okay. So, first of all, what's the point of Kaddish? Like how-
Praise of God, basically.
Yeah,
Praise
yeah.
of God.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. Praise of God. Right. So we know that there's no what we call the mourner's Kaddish. There's no reference to death or mourning or sadness. Right. It's God is magnified, sanctified, exalted, glorified. Right? So I asked that question it was very, very vague. What's the liturgical purpose of Kaddish? What's the liturgical purpose of Kaddish?
What, do you mean like dividing this, ending each section of the service?
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much. Right. So do you want to go into explain that again?
Oh, just, that's how you mark the end of each section of the service.
Right, exactly.
You went it with the Kaddish, not always mourner's Kaddish.
You end it with a Kaddish. In some cases, it's
A
called a
Kaddish,
mourner's
right.
Kaddish, but it's a Kaddish.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be a mourner's Kaddish. It can be Kaddish.
Lots of Kaddish.
Yeah, so this is great. So and now we know that there are two types of Kaddish. That's what's called Kaddish Shalem. Right, and then we have what they call Chatzi Kaddish, which is actually a misnomer. It's really called a diminished Kaddish. You have a full Kaddish and a diminished Kaddish, which is what we call the half Kaddish, which is really not half, right? So the purpose. So what's the purpose between a Chatzi Kaddish, we call the half Kaddish, the diminished Kaddish, and the full Kaddish?
But you don't say the last couple of verses.
Yeah, but I mean liturgically, why do you have a longer one?
I
Yes,
think,
go ahead. Sandy.
okay, I think I heard Rabbi Goodman once give a little drash about this. So I'm
Rabbi
embarrassed
Goodman,
that I don't
oh my God,
remember the details.
I miss his draw. He would just get up there and it's like
Yeah.
gold would pour out. Gold would pour out.
I think the Chatzi Kaddish is like telling you something big is coming. So you do the Chatzi Kaddish before the Amida. And then the full Kaddish is saying, okay, let's just take a break and because we just did something big. That's my kind of vague memory of it.
That's actually a pretty good explanation of it. It's a
Okay.
little different than I would put it, but that's pretty good actually.
Okay.
It's real. I would put it a different way, which is if you imagine that you're back in 11th grade and you have your 11th grade geology book, right? And you have chapter 1, section A and section B and section C and section D, right? And then chapter 2. So at the end, the end of section A, Chatzi Kaddish, the end of section B, Chatzi Kaddish, end of section C, Chatzi Kaddish, end of the chapter, Kaddish Shalem, because now we're starting something new, which is chapter 2. So the Chatzi Kaddish marks a smaller segment within a larger segment of the service. Yeah, but I like the idea to say like something, we're stopping here, but something bigger is coming. I like.
Well, many times the Kaddish Shalem signals the end of the service.
Right, the Kaddish Shalem, yeah, we'll also signal the end of the service. Yeah, Kaddish Shalem will end it, but in this case, it ends here. It's ending here. So this is a mourner's Kaddish is really a Chatzi Kaddish, right? It doesn't have Tikkabel in it. So the idea, now, how did the mourner's Kaddish become associated with the synagogue and with synagogue ritual? Another interesting question.
That's a good, tough questions.
Because one of the other things that you do is that when you study a text of Torah, you always, when you finish studying a text of Torah, you always praise God. So in Middle Ages and even earlier, people would meet in the house of study or whatever, the big midrash, study, right? And then they finish with a Kaddish. Now, it just so happened that a lot of times they'd be finishing they purposely time the ending of their study to coincide with the afternoon or the evening service. And so so the people that would be coming to synagogue oftentimes would be mourners among them. So then it became eventually certain Kaddishes became associated with people who were mourners because they would be in the synagogue at the time that the people would complete their studies for the day. And then eventually it just became, associated with the mourners Kaddish. So it's a little bit of a history, but that's good. Okay. Oh, God, it's 8:56 already. All right, let's do the Red Sox. Yeah. So let's see. So next week, we'll, this is like this is really like basic Nusach, right? So next week I'm going to start the basic Nusach for the evening service on Friday night. So by the way, so I mentioned earlier about Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbat being like the real start of Shabbat, right? After Lefanavi. So the other thing, but we just had this recently, when you're like during Sukkot, when you come to synagogue on Friday night during Sukkot, Kabbalah Shabbat doesn't exist. Right. You start with, what do you start with? You start with Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbat, right? Now, what's the reason for that? Why do you just ignore the welcoming of Shabbat? Because you're already in a festive period. Chol Hamoed is actually you're in the middle of a festival. You don't need to be. You're already at an elevated state of joy. So you don't need that elevation of joy. So that's why you don't need it. You don't need that. Yeah, it's kind of like the same way. Why don't you wear tefillin on Shabbat? Right. Because tefillin are considered an oat, Aleph, Vav, Tav. It's a symbol or a sign. Well, I learned something really interesting today about that. So it means a sign or a symbol. Oti liolam, like Kivayam Shabbat, Oti liolam, Oti liolam, Oti. It's a symbol, right? So Shabbat is a symbol. So according to tradition, you need two witnesses for something, right? So when you put on tefillin, that's the witness of your prayer during the week. But Shabbat, the day itself is already a witness, so you don't need the additional witness of the tefillin. So that's why with tefillin on Shabbat. And then, of course, then the rabbis made up this whole thing. Somebody might carry their tefillin to shul or something like that, which is the same reason. That's the reason why you don't blow shofar on Shabbat.
Can't carry the shofar.
Yeah, because someone might accidentally, well, two things. Someone might accidentally carry their shofar to synagogue outside of Eruv, right? And the other reason is tikkun. In case the shofar cracks or needs to be repaired, you're not allowed to make the repair on Shabbat.
Mm-hmm.
So what if that's the only shofar around and now it's broken? Right?
So on Shabbos though, you still carry the talis.
Well, it's within an Eruv, yeah.
Yeah, so why couldn't you carry the talis?
Well, the Cal's saying, why can't you, since people will still carry their talis to show, why couldn't they, why can't you carry it to tefillin to show? But it's not about carrying tefillin, it's the idea that it's an oath. So I learned something in my biblical grammar class today. I have this professor at Hebrew College named Harvey Bach, who's like just someone you want to shoot because he's so exacting.
Does he still carve?
What?
On the side?
No, B-O-C-K. He's a retired lawyer. The guy knows his grammar is like insanely, complete. But he mentioned the word oats came up in the class. I forget exactly. We looked at some Rashi on the Cain and Abel story. But he said, by the way, the word Ayatollah. It's an Aramaic word. Right. It's not even Arabic, it's Aramaic. It's an old form, a very old form of, before Arabic became Aramaic. It was the language that everybody spoke in the world in the early Middle Ages, right? Especially in the Middle East. That's why our prayers are in Aramaic. Yit Gadal v'Yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah is not Hebrew, as you all know, right? It's Aramaic. Because it was written in a language that everybody could speak. Everybody knew what it meant.
Mhm.
So the word Ayatollah, it means Ayat Ola, which Allah, Ayat Ola, which means the Ayatollah is the symbol of the presence of Allah on earth. He's like the Pope, but that's the oat, the word oat, which is Ayat in in Aramaic. So it's like I didn't know that. It's like, wow, that's a really interesting fact.
That is cool.
Yeah.
That is cool.
All right, so next Monday night, the Yirza Hashem, as they say, you know what that means?
Yeah,
God willing, yes.
not really.
God willing, yeah. Next Monday, the Yirza Hashem, we'll start Arvit, the basic Nusach for Arvit for Friday night, which is different than it is on a weekday. The melodies are different. The structure of the Nusach is different than it is on a weekday.
Good.
Okay. All right, guys. So, Sandy, what's the score?
5-1.
Okay. What-
6.
Okay.
They just took Erod out.
They did.
Oh, that's not good.
No, it is good. He gave up a hard double and
Oh, that's not.
we have Tanner Houck pitching. He's good.
Oh, really? He did great the other night.
What? He was great the other night.
Yeah, he did great. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, guys. Well, thank
Okay,
you so much.
take care. Go
Have a
Sox.
good night.
Night.